this piece. Alright, well I'll pop the blades to one side for the moment because we've got to work on this mechanism plate, and this mechanism plate has had a hard life. So first thing I would normally do is remove this lever. This lever swings the blade actuating ring backwards and forwards, which in turn opens the blades, swings the blades on their pivots to open and close them. So, got the spring unhooked from that. We'll remove the single screw that holds that into the centre. Sometimes there's a washer under there. There is not in this case. It's not there by design. It's there to compensate for a problem where that shaft was slightly long and left a little bit extra rattle in it, in the mechanism. So we've got 4 screws hold the back of this retaining plate on. One is long, the one we just moved was long, the other 3 are short. These were held in with some lacquer of sorts, something that works like Loctite, but whether it was Loctite or whether it was just simply a lacquer, I don't know. It's certainly something that's used in that style. Get those 4 screws out of the way. There's our plate. It's pretty grimy. Here's the blade actuating ring. Again, that's pretty grimy. And then here's the body. Now this, I really do not like removing these because they're a bugger to get back in place correctly. I think I will attempt to straighten up that bent lever in position so that it doesn't catch. That looks good. And I'll clean this mechanism plate where it is, I think. Now the sun's coming around here, so I'm just having to shift things because otherwise it'll be all blown out and you won't be able to see anything for the bright lights. So the mechanism plate needs to be swabbed clean in much the same way everything else was. And again, I'm doing exactly the same sort of thing. I'm wanting to remove all of those traces of filth. You can see the colour that's coming off in. All of that, whatever that residue is, it was on there and certainly should not have been on there. With a shutter like this, it's quite common that there'll be a certain amount of grease around the centre part here, and that's where the main lever, that main ring that cocks the shutter runs, and I can tell by looking at the colour of that, there are 2 different colours of grease there. One was your more yellow orangish general purpose grease, and the other was grey, probably a graphite based grease. And so the grease has gone on there at 2 different times from 2 different people, and whoever put the second lot on, and I would imagine it was that graphite stuff, didn't bother to clean the shutter completely. They just greased it up with new grease, and plenty of it too, more grease than it could possibly need or use. When that was done relative to the time when the last person had a go at it, I don't know. the last person certainly flood cleaned it, and that flood cleaning would have moved a lot of that graphite grease around the shutter and into places it shouldn't have been. That's looking a bit cleaner. Right, so now I'm going to turn my attention to this retard gear train, and my camera's telling me my battery's dying. That's a useful thing. I'm just going to work this with a lot of solvent to wash out any filth that's in here. I don't know whether this got the benefit of that flood cleaning or not. Quite possibly not. When people are flood cleaning shutters, they often just spray it directly, the solvent directly into the shutter blades, and then they're sometimes surprised it finds its way down to the diaphragm blades. Sometimes when you see a camera that's been flood cleaned, people hadn't even bothered to remove the rear lens group at all, or clean up after them, so that you'll see grey pools of muck, dried out oily mess on the inside of the rear lens group. This didn't appear quite that bad, but it certainly had a lot of dust. I'm going to keep going until that battery dies. I've got other things to do shortly, so I'll stop at that stage. That's working quite well now, and the pallets are dropping in and out as expected. So bending up that lever looks to have been the right thing to do in this particular case. That's good, that body's cleaned up well, and I'll have to now clean the blade actuating ring here, which is very grimy. That dark grey paste that's on it, that dusty looking stuff, I mean, it may have been graphite, certainly some component of it probably was, but it's dry, it's very dry. I'm not convinced it's really doing much in the way of lubricating there. And when I'm all said and done, I've still got to find a replacement for that missing spring on the shutter release arm. That's very strange. I'm sure I'll have one, it's just I'll have to see if I can reclaim one from a broken shutter release. Or I could replace the whole arm, I suppose. That's a bit better. This little gear here forms part of the flash sink, and the flash sink has to have a delay so that when, depending on the type of flash bulb you are using, X sync, with X sync, that's used for electronic flash. You can use it for bulb flash with very long shutter exposures, longer shutter exposures. Basically, X sync, the flash is fired at the point when the shutter blades have reached the maximum opening. With M sync, the other sync there, sync setting, the bulb is actually fired before the shutter blades reach fully open position. And that's to give the flash bulbs time to start burning at peak brilliance, because they take time to warm up, and it's a measurable amount of time. And if you don't give them enough time, then you're not getting the benefit of the full output of the flash bulbs. There are other sorts of flash bulbs. I'm thinking of FP ones were made for focal plane shutters, and the idea of them was that they didn't let out their light in one great big burst. That what they did instead was that they had a longer and very even output of light, so that it would illuminate the film evenly has the slit in the focal plane shutter tracked across the film at the back of the camera. But I've never had anything to do with focal plane shutter bulbs. It's always been one of those magical settings on my cameras that I've never really needed to know anything about. I have just used bulb flash on mostly on rangefinder cameras, I suppose, with leaf blade shutters, and with cameras with focal plane shutters I think I've always had electronic flashes to use, so it hasn't been an issue. If I'd been a little bit older I'd have had more time with bulb flash presumably. That's very good. Let's give that a white. I'm going to work a bit of graphite powder into this when I'm done to provide some lubrication in this part. I could have just given it a wipe with a bit of molybdenum, but I would much prefer to use graphite there. I think that's good, that moves nice and smoothly. The camera's still grizzling that its battery's about flat, but it's been about flat for 5 minutes now and we're still chugging along, so we'll just leave it going. Clean this up. It's a bit gummy with dried lubricant. Now this piece in particular, I normally do put a touch of lubricant here. And I use the molybdenum and I put just a, come on back here, just a tiny smear in there and in the centre where it shifts that blade actuating ring backwards and forwards. There you go. I'm going to have to find my good tweezers. I can't be dealing with these crappy pairs. Stuff keeps going, flying. I have in mind I took them to go and do some important job and obviously didn't bring them back again. That's very good. Let's try this. Yep, that works nicely. You have to be very careful if you're using a cotton bud anywhere near something like this retard gear train. Fine fibres of it can get tangled up in the gears and you may not even notice it at the time. I had one job where the camera worked beautifully for about 6 months and suddenly the shutter speeds went funny on it, and when it came back to me I discovered there was a tiny tuft of cotton trapped inside, so be careful with that. That's good. That's the mechanism plate. We've got the mechanism plate, we've got the housing with the diaphragm all in it. So now I need to clean up the shutter blades and they can go back and we can assemble the front and rear sides of the case. And by that time, with a bit of luck, my spare batteries will have finished charging and I'll be able to carry on working. Let's just get these blades cleaned up. I'm going to do these with the naphtha. I think I'm going to have to clean them with the carbon tet as well because it's not lifting off that shiny silvery look which is almost certainly left over from the flood cleaning. I'm just watching this camera. It's been telling me that the battery's flat for a long time now. I won't panic about that in future. Obviously doesn't mean a hell of a lot. I think it's almost certainly it'll just stop recording any when it feels like it. It could come without warning at any moment. So there may be some discontinuity with the video. I'll just have to live with that. Alright, so far so good. Now I want to clean them with some carbon tet, I think, to get the last of that staining off there. Alright, I've got other things to be doing. Back shortly. Well, I just dealt with the high contrast issue by pulling the curtain across. So it might be a bit darker than it used to be. Let's have a look at these blades. I'm swabbing them again. This time I'm using CRC Electroclean. I think I told you it was carbon tet, but I don't think it is carbon tet. It is a mixture of something. Trichloroethylene and tetrachloroethylene. Both of which doubtless make you grow another head or something. Or your children will have flippers instead of arms, something like that. Yeah, that's very very hard to get this staining off here. It is coming off, but not as easily as I'd like. I mean, what I can do with blades when they're in a state like this is you can polish them with Brasso and then clean them again with naphtha afterwards to remove any polish residue or any abrasive. But that'll certainly remove staining and discoloration from blades. Yeah, that's nasty stuff, whatever was on there. It's certainly leaving quite a bit of stain on these cotton buds. Well, the discoloration won't make the blades work any worse than they otherwise would, so they're just aren't as pretty as I'd like them to be. Right, I think we'll call that it. Yeah, that mechanism plate is nice and clean now. That looks very nice. I think I will lubricate that lightly with a bit of graphite powder, and I'm not going to do that to the diaphragm because that works very smoothly as it is. So I'll just drop a little bit of graphite powder in here. Work it in, and then blow out all the excess. needs very little. And I'm going to do the same for the retard gear train. Just drop a little bit onto those gears and work the action. I'm going to blow that dust out, that graphite powder. And we can assemble the shutter. So unhook that spring, swing that lever around. This puts the blade actuating ring into the position where, I'll just check I've got this camera focused. Right, I've got the blade actuating ring into the position where the blades would be fully open. Now I can start applying the blades. And the first blade goes here, in that position. Second blade goes there. Third blade goes there. Fourth blade goes there. That final blade just picked up a bit of something there. What was that? Oh, something just stained that. I'll just picked up a speck of something it shouldn't have had. That's better. Fifth blade. Now the shutter case can go back over the mechanism plate. I'll just move that to one end so that the lever here doesn't tip me off. Just align the mechanism plate in the case. They don't want to line up. What's going on? It's not dropping down into place correctly. Something is holding it up. That blade's been disturbed. Be careful when you're getting the case together like this that you don't disturb the blades while you're doing it. Otherwise they might come off their position, their correct position, and that could cause them to get damaged if they get trapped. That just really doesn't want to go on. What is it about that shutter? It could be that the retard gear train is too far over, and that's preventing this from fitting over. That's better. That dropped down into place. I just wriggled it on from a different direction, I suppose you'd say. Now where's our kit of parts? we have 3 screws that hold the front and rear, the mechanism plate into the case. And I'll get 2 of them in place and I'll check that the mechanism works. And that's fine. If you swing that lever across, the blade should close. We fit that spring in place. See that they open and close smoothly. The aperture, of course, opens and closes smoothly. Our 3rd screw can go into that case. And I'll do those 3 screws up tight. There is a date or a number scratched onto the back of the shutter at this point. Some sort of control number, I think. I don't think it was a date that the shutter was serviced. It was just a control number from when the shutter was manufactured. Alright, that all looks very good. There's a bit of silveriness to those blades still. I think we're stuck with that, short of polishing it away, and I think it's just there to stay. It's like it's ingrained into the blades, whatever that was. Some sort of lubricant, probably graphite, possibly molybdenum. Right, so I'm going to get the flash sync post in place, and that's its little metal contact which sits against the body at the back. As I've mentioned, this is styrene plastic or something very much like it. That contact is really nasty, and that's all filth that's from that flood cleaning on there. I can't afford to attack this with solvent, so I'm just going to rub that off with the tip of a piece of toothpick. I'll test this later. These are always a bit tricky to get down into position. You're fitting a square peg into a square hole, but unfortunately the square peg is usually cracked and split, and there's more of an oblong peg than a square peg. And you can't afford to be rough with it because it'll fall to bits. Oh, that went in very easily. Held in place with a single brass screw. I'm really missing my proper tweezers. That's good. That looks fine. Yeah. I'm going to have to look very closely at these components as I assemble things, because I know that it was misassembled. I already know that one spring is missing. What I don't know is whether anything's been damaged as a result of the misassembly. and looks good. This spring does the 500th of a second speed. That's the extra spring that's brought into play to make the 500th of a second speed function. And that was incorrectly positioned previously. It was on the wrong side of this lever. This lever does the flash sync. Oh, that lever is bent. I can tell because it's not sitting down on the cam correctly there. Let's see if I can encourage that down. Oh, that's not good. Okay. No, I think that's buggered. I'll have a go at truing that up. But I think that little flash lever there, the lever that closes the flash contact, is bent up out of shape. I don't know what my chances are of straightening that out yet. Just got to disentangle it from the flash contact. It's always a bit tricky. I'm looking at it, and it's certainly bent up. It's whether it will unbend. That's the mystery, because often things won't go back, or when you try to bend them back, they bend at a different point. So you end up with them zigzagged in a not useful fashion. Oh, I don't like the look of that. All these pieces, of course, are quite small and comparatively delicate. This particular lever is, you have to be very careful with it. In any case, it runs on this cam, and it's easy for it to have, it's a little bit out of shape, it has too much resistance. Oh, I think that flash contact is looking a bit. Oh, it does fire. Alright, I think that's. I think it will go. Right.